And at the same time, there is a need for countries, many countries across the world, to catch up with the rest of the world. There is a very clear opinion that there is just a handful of countries that have whose development has resulted in the climate crisis that we see today. And that burden should not be carried by the rest of the world. And I'm going to go into some of these aspects as well. But I want to begin by asking both of you the same question. Professor Zhu, I'll start with you. In your assessment, in the coming decades, will the new world order be based on sustainability? We currently talk about money power, we talk about military power, but if my islands are drowning, if I have frequent floods, if I have heat waves that we cannot control, and all of it impacts not just regular life, but businesses, people who are running those businesses, are we looking sooner rather than later at a future where the new world order will truly be defined by the nations that are most sustainable?
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the NXT, the organizers, to invite me for this wonderful forum. My name is Xufeng Zhu, Professor and the Dean of the School of Public Policy and Management of Tsinghua University. And also, I'm running two research institutes. One is the Institute for Sustainable Development Goals of Tsinghua University, and another one is the Research Center for Science and Technology Development and Governance, which focuses on something like data or AI governance. So as your question would like to talk today is the new order. First, I think the new technology will change our world. And also, technology could be very important, potentially impact on the sustainability. For example, the AI, everybody talks about AI, what's the progresses and also the consequences to the economic development. But I today would like to talk something about the relations between AI and the sustainability. The first one, obviously, AI can improve efficiency. In different industries and sectors, the companies and the government and also municipal governance, they can use AI to improve the efficiency to produce and also manage the cities and also local governments. Another one is for the carbon, because the efficiency makes we can reduce the waste and we can reduce the energy consumption. Another very important thing is AI can monitor more accurately our emission. This is made us more transparent and more efficient. The third one, I think, is quite controversial idea that who are the most emitter, our people. Yeah. So currently in developed countries or in the world trend, actually the lower birth rate and the geographical change that we already entered the aging society, and we need young generations. But on the other hand, the debates over the AI's consequence is we will worry about the job unemployment, and the young generations would lose their jobs. But the two questions can be interlinked. So on the other hand, on the one hand, the birth rate is going down, and we are shortage of human resources and workers. But another side, we are worrying about we are shortage of our employment, and also we would like to think we can say that AI can be the solution for our geographically changing, which means that at the same time, you know, the future society would be lower population, higher automation, and then low emission. So that's maybe the positive consequence of AI for sustainability. But also another thing is we must think about the negative consequence or impact of AI for sustainability, which means there are a lot of electronic wastes.
Right, exactly. I was just going to come to that because it's very interesting that when we're talking about sustainability,
yes.
you know, you're talking about AI, and there's already so much controversy around AI and the amount of power and electricity that
yes.
the compute for AI
yes,
consumes.
That's what I want to say. Yes, another thing is the computing and the training big models need a lot of energy. So that's we can calculate the balance. To develop AI need energy and made a lot of emission. And to use AI, we can improve efficiency, and then we can save energy. So that's a balance. So what I want to say is AI could be a positive and a negative effect for the sustainability. Oh, okay, I stop here. Maybe we can second round. Okay.
Right, absolutely. Professor Mahajan, then bring you into the conversation as well. I want to understand from you, when we talk about sustainability, and this conversation has been going on for quite some time, there have been terms like SDGs, now there's environmental, social governance, ESG, there are a lot of green initiatives. But what are the genuine parameters that now need to be perhaps codified to understand that a company or a country is actually making sustainable moves, that they're walking the talk, and it's not just simply fluff on paper?
That's a great question. I think the role of AI is critical, is very important, and everyone's talking about it. But at the end of the day, decisions, especially related to sustainability, are made by human beings. They are made by governments, and to a large extent, they are made by the private sector, corporates. How do they allocate their resources? And that is where my research is focused on, being a professor of finance and interested in issues of ESG and corporate social responsibility, as well as corporate social irresponsibility, because those are critical in conserving and sustaining the planet, the decisions which companies make. So I'm an empiricist. I conduct empirical research, and I'll just share with you some of the results which we have discovered. I have no dog in the hunt because the issue of sustainability and climate have taken on a political connotation as well. And I have no position on that, may have personal opinions, but as an empiricist, we just analyze the data and report the results. And some of these results actually have come from my co-chairing a PhD dissertation with a PhD student at IIT Delhi, who is a professor. So we have looked at the data of US firms as well as Indian firms. And I'll just very succinctly tell you what we have discovered. So there is a consulting house which gathers massive data from all media outlets, including newspapers, television, etc., identifying misbehavior by corporations, by companies. So we have access to the data. For example, a company like IBM may have indulged in bribery or child labor or polluting the environment. This will be recorded in this data set. So we have thousands of companies, and we know exactly when they transgressed or indulged in corporate social irresponsible behavior. What we do is look at what happens to the typical financial matrices like return on investment, return on assets, stock price, as to what happens. And what we discover is very interesting. Consistently, we find that when companies undertake misbehavior, when they pollute, when they don't worry about climate, we find that their ROA goes down. We find that the stock price goes down. The effect is not just short term, but it's longer term as well. We also managed to get data from a very large retail chain in the United States, where every time when you go and shop and you go through the checkout counter, it records whether you bought a toothpaste or a toothbrush or a shirt. It knows the brand, the company which made it, and we have this data for all the transactions which took place, which are literally in millions. And what we try to find out is a company, when it violates or indulges in corporate social irresponsibility or violates ESG, what happens to its sales? And what we find is that the sales consistently decline for these companies.
Okay.
What is interesting, and this is where I think demographics and political persuasions come into play, we find that these results are much more acute in places where you have Democrats ruling as opposed to the Republicans ruling. We find that the results are more acute when this store is located in a high income area, or it is located where the educational level of people is high. So these results are very consistent, that if companies do not look at their social responsibility and sustainability in a serious manner,
Okay.
there are consequences in the marketplace.
But I want to then, go a step further, because let's also then talk about governments and nations, right? You've given me the example of companies not working and not taking the idea of sustainability seriously. But if I were to take that same example and apply it to the world and look at the world as a group of larger and smaller corporations, Professor Zhu, and I'll take this same question with you as well, sir. Professor Zhu, I want to understand from you, how are we then to ensure that sustainability does not become a luxury that can't be afforded by the developing world?
First, your question related to two levels of inequality. The first one is within a nation, which means the domestic inequality between upper level and the lower level populations. Another one I would like to emphasize today is the inequality among different worlds in the world. In developed countries and developing countries. Let me talk about the new phenomena of AI development. As we can see that recent years, the developed countries have established a lot of computing and data centers in developing countries. Because, developing countries, for example, in Middle East countries, the energy is cheaper. Therefore, this actually will raise new geographical inequality among developed and developing countries, because this is actually a new form of energy trade. Unlike the traditional energy trade, like oil tankers, and also they must move energy from developing countries, resource countries, to developed countries, consuming countries. But currently, developed countries need only established, computing centers within developing countries, which means they actually import energy from developing countries. And then, we can see that emission retained in developing countries, and economic development potential with AI was focused on developed countries. That could be a new form of international inequality among the new technology and the development of AI for sustainability, I think. So this is, I think, another opinion that I would like to emphasize at this forum. Thank you.
Professor Mahajan, just taking that now a step further, we will have to address those inequalities between the nations at some point, right? We can't head towards a world where there's total either climate deniability, deniability of climate crisis, or there is absolutely no focus on, on a looming climate crisis. How do we then ensure that there is at least equality in terms of decision making amongst governments? How do we ensure that the developed world is not dictating the terms for the next few decades for a world that's still developing, and that they end up taking some responsibility for their own actions as well? How does one do that? Is there any institution like that in the world? Because I'm sure at some point we will come down to putting the paperwork together, right? That there will be, and there is of course already, but it's not enforceable. It's, are we looking at a world where it's possible to have certain international institutions then create guidelines which are equally applicable to all? Or are we just looking at a future where each country has to decide what's best for them and their people?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. It's an excellent question, but it's a very difficult question. We do not have institutional arrangements in place today where all countries could have a fair say and everyone bore the burden in a fair way, where fair is a value judgment. We don't just have the institutional arrangement. The UN has become impotent. There are not many alternatives. The burden really should be borne to some extent by the developed countries because they are the primary polluters. And the developing countries are trying to develop, and that typically results in pollution. And that retards their development and growth. And in a perfect world, the developed countries should support the developing countries to develop and help them provide technology so that it reduces pollution. But that is really not happening. At the end of the day, when we talked about developed countries, and most of them are democracies, ultimately the solution lies at the ballot box. In developed countries, especially democracies, I think the conscience of the citizens has to be stirred. They have to recognize that the planet will be short-lived if corrective action is not taken. And they then, therefore, will have to elect legislators and leaders who will pay heed to what needs to be done. Regrettably, that is not the case at this juncture. But one has to be hopeful. So there is no easy fix to that question. I think countries are trying. They're trying hard. Many developed countries are voicing their concern, but not all of them. And this is a process in how governance takes place amongst countries. So we have to rethink. We have to rethink. You know, we had the League of Nations. That was replaced by the United Nations. We have to rethink what kind of a central command and control structure can be created, which is meant for the benefit of mankind and not just a few countries.
Absolutely. And since you're both academics, I'm running out of time, but I have one last question for you. And I say this with some thought here, because policies are only as good as the leaders who bring them, and they're only as good as how all the leaders stay in power. And we've seen that. For example, in the United States of America, there was a lot of talk about EVs, sustainability, and then, of course, the government changes, and suddenly there's all this talk about, oh, climate change is not real. So a lot of the policies are dictated by who's in power. And therefore, my last question to both of you, 1 minute each. What is the one thing that we must stop teaching the next generation of leaders? Professor Mahajan.
What we must stop teaching? Why did you give me that question first and not this gentleman here? Because that is a very difficult question to really answer.
All right,
but
then
more-
maybe you can tell me one thing that we must teach
Yeah.
to the next generation of leaders.
Well, what I would say is to teach our young people the value of conservation, the value of being frugal in expending energy and resources, and let the system start its course from that early stage onwards. Because the older dogs, it's very hard for them to learn new tricks. The younger generation is much more given to these kinds of issues, and they're much more sympathetic to the planet. And therefore, I think our focus should be that at early age in schools to start young people making aware of what might happen if we do not correct our ways.
Absolutely. Professor Zhu.
1 minute. What I want to teach the young generation is, throughout the history of human civilization, technological revolution could be the main driver for the prosperity of our society or our world. So our young generation, you must learn the technologies, how to promote the development of technology, and we would like to look forward the next technological revolution and the prosperity of our society. Thank you.
Right, absolutely. On that note, a huge round of applause for our speakers, for our professors who've joined us from Texas A&M and from the Tsinghua University in China. Thank you so much, Professor Mahajan, and thank you so much, Professor Zhu, for joining us at NXT 2026.
Thank you.
Well, with that panel now, we are turning our focus to next in global affairs once again. It's time for our next segment, and in fact, in this, we are going to be having a keynote address now on the future of immigration and diasporas. Again, a very, very topical issue, a trending issue, an issue that is being talked about, spoken about, not just in the country our next speaker belongs to, but across the world. I would like to invite on stage member, House of Representatives, New Zealand, Honourable Rachel Brooking, MP. Let's have some energy for her.